Hello everyone and welcome back to the Heathen Journal. Now, I guess if you guys already know, I'm posting 2 videos in 1 week because I am off work for 3 days, which is awesome. And today's chapter we are reading Frankish Heathenry and the overview. So let's get into it. Let me get it. There we go. Who were the Franks and what were their pre-Christian roots? This is a question that has caused confusion and headache among those searching for the answers. Even the origin of their name has been hotly debated, although the generally accepted origin of Frank is found in the Germanic root Frick, which relates this word intimately to the Old Norse Frek, Old High German Fre, and New High German Frech, as well as the Old Saxon Frockni. This etymological connection leads us to speculate that, by some austere quality of their constitution, they became to be known by the others as the bold, forward, and wanton. As a modern heathen reconstructionist with primarily French ancestry, it has been my explicit goal to reconstruct the worldview of this motley confederation of Germanic and Celtic tribes, to better understand how they reckoned the world and around them, what form their relationship with the holy powers may have taken. It is not sufficient, in my opinion, to simply raise a toast to Mirivek and call myself a modern Frank. There are plenty of heathens today who take up the name and identity of a particular cultural group without putting the effort into understanding. Through research and experimentation, worldview of those they have chosen to emulate. I have also heard the argument, we don't have enough information on them, so we do it our way. This is not, however, a factual representation of what we do have on the subject. Despite popular belief, the Franks have left us many, many clues into their lives. These may not be to the extent of Scandinavian sources of some periods, of the same periods, my mistake, but what we do have in the form of archaeology, historical texts, and comparative etymology is worthy of note. The Franks, 471, were not a homogeneous Germanic tribe, but rather a confederation of no less than 11 groups, 2 of which are greatly suspected of being of Celtic, or of a Celtic-sized origin. The Tensitari and Usipets, I believe. This is based upon the linguistics of both of these tribes' names. Usipet translates as Celtic for well-horsed, and Tensitari may be related to the Old Irish Tecte, proper right, and early Welsh right entitlement. By Julius Caesar's account, these 2 tribes were by their very nature agriculturists and occupied the region which was among the Ubi, who were accustomed to Gaulish manners. Caesar also states in Bello Gallico, the Germans are not studious of agriculture. One could therefore conclude that due to the Usipets and Tintari's non-Germanic custom of farming and their tribal names, they were truly Celts, or of a Celtic nature. However, A.C. Moray takes a position that such distinctions between the German and Celt were largely fabricated upon political agenda and information from the likes Ariovistus soldiers, and that the trans-Rhenish cultures were actually homogenized in late Latin. From the moment Clovis I conquered the vastness of Istria and Aquitaine, the Franks were an ethnic blend of West Frankish Germanic tribes, as well as Celts. Why did I say Quelt? I don't know why. It is for this very reason that many serious Frankish enthusiasts must accept that much of what defined these people was influenced by this Franco-Gallo-Roman admixture. To deny this is illogical, as it is highly improbable to untangle what we now label as Germanic from the Celtic concerning this folk. Furthermore, there is much evidence that particularities of their law codes found analogues in Roman tradition. Sorry about that. This is not surprising, as their confederation dates to as early as the 3rd century, and that at various times the tribes that made up their numbers were Roman. Some reconstructionists would attempt to try and sift through the whole of the Frankish people to remove what is wholly Germanic and elevated above their impurities. Yet to do so would be akin to try and reconstruct the Canadian choosing to focus on only English customs at the expense of other influences that have shaped its identity, just such as the Native American and French folk roots. It is best to retain the character of the Frank for what he was, a cultural melting pot of Germanic hereditary law and German-influenced proprietary law. There has always been, from observation, an unfavorable view of the Franks by modern heathens today. This seems to stem from two underlying factors. First is the disdain for anything related to Charlemagne, due to his conquest and forcible conversion of other heathen peoples, nearer and dearer to the modern Anglosphere, namely the subjugation of the Saxons, finalized in 803. Secondly, the majority of modern North American heathens are of English-speaking or other Germanic descent, or they have entered the Anglosphere through assimilation, and any routes leading to France or Romance peoples is largely undesirable. There was a time in the past decades when modern heathens were clamoring about hypothetical Norse roots to justify their interest in heathenry. In time, this gave way to acceptance of more continental heathen worldviews, but that of the Franks has been largely untapped, as can be evinced by the lack of modern pagan websites and or organizations in France dedicated to their understanding. Most of these websites are dedicated to l'Assatru and Les Peoples du Nords. Sorry. Even though I took French, I suck at French. So that's a thing. None dedicate their heathen efforts to the Germanic peoples of their own ancient past, as well as a quick Google search will show. Hopefully with a better understanding of who the Franks were and a critical, deep, and unbiased look into the extent vestiges of their pre-Christian roots, more modern heathens will take up this endeavor. I sincerely hope that this interest is sparked among the modern Francosphere, as their history books have sold them short on the Frankish branch of their ethnic tree in preference of a highly romanticized and mythic portrait of the noble Gallios as the progenitors of the French people. In the words of Augustine Thierry, this period, Merovingian, is that which we most gladly abridge, which we push aside without any scruples. Their shocking savagery, the mores of these destroyers of Rome, their barbarous and bizarre aspects, are how we have come to paint them. This sentiment has found detractors for the most part only in Quebec, where reconstructionists are turning the tide. It must be stated that modern Buddhistic practice, as well as heathen reconstructionist philosophy, has taken many decades to evolve in North America. Hopefully the same will transpire among the French. The law of the Franks, after the conquest of Clovis, remained largely Germanic with a substantial subset of Roman influences. It is through this law code that Lex Salica, or more properly the Malberg, that we find the most pertinent information concerning the relationships between Franks, Gallo-Romans, and their classes, as well as the world around them. Thanks to the widely cited and quite unattested etymological work of Hendrik Kern, who dutifully researched the etymology of 10 collected manuscripts of the Law Code by J.H. Hessel. We may extrapolate further knowledge from these reconstructed Old Frankish words and definitions. The ability to do so means that we, as reconstructionists, may use comparative sources from other neighboring tribes and their linguistic similarities for reshaping a long-gone or forgotten worldview in as much detail as our research may afford. Obviously, the first step in reconstructing a Frankish worldview is to sift through the many clues found in their grave sites, such as that of Childeric I and other archaeological artifacts. What to accept as a plausibly Frankish artifact or the look for such a thing, is highly important. Authenticity must be determined by the presence of a historically recognized population center, or trade routes such as those in ancient Austrasia, Neustria, Aquitaine, Swabia, and to a lesser degree, Burgundy. Though keeping in mind that this last one was largely Burgundian territory prior to Frankish rule, the linguistic record may enjoy greater liberty in the comparison of a reconstructed vocabulary with other closely related tribes, most notably the Anglo-Saxons via the Saxon, Anglo, and Jutish migration routes, through territories occupied by tribes making up the Frankish Confederacy. It is also possible that elements of their language were exchanged through the well-developed trade route with Kent, or that at this time their early Germanic tongues had no real differences to speak of. It is known that the strong kinsman relationship between the courts of Kent and Neustria, through intermarriage and possible Frankish overlordship, allowed for a constant exchange of goods and artistic styles from Francia to British Isle, leading to a need for mutual intelligibility on the merchant level. Although the Franks officially became Christian via the baptism of their king Clovis I in 496, I seriously doubt the piety and monotheism of the early Frankish church, as the convicting of relics and pilgrimages to cult centers of various local saints betrays in them a truly polytheistic worldview. Such practices, however, were widespread across Europe at the time and not isolated to Merovingian Gaul. The many cults of the saints can at times be tied to ancient pagan, Germanic, Celtic, and Roman cult sites, being reappropriated under a thin veneer of Catholicism. Even throughout the Carolingian rule of Charlemagne and Louis the Pious, the exchange between Rome and Francia did not solidify the position and integrity of the Church's canon. More often than not, Christian theological doctrine had to be reshaped by their indigenous culture so as to be palatable and easily digested by the lower class Franks. If this was so true for the 8th century Catholic Church under such a staunch Catholic as Charlemagne, it is hard to imagine what form the earliest Frankish Christian worldview took. It may have been no more than the common Frank, or the kings putting out most of their eggs in the basket of Christ, for power and glory over pious supplication. According to the writings of Nicetas of Trier and Gregory of Tours, Clovis was enamored with the cult and power of St. Martin of Tours, and tales of miracles purportedly performed by the saint aided in his decision to convert. So the very center of early Frankish Christianity was worship of the relics of saints, which helped the new cult gain wide acceptance throughout the realms to the benefit of the nobility at the times, more than to the church itself. According to Camille Julien, the French historian and archaeologist, the relics coming into ruin led the population to believe that they had in their presence the actual power of the saints to heal the sick, a physical, tangible form. It is this need for physical concentration of holy power which leads me to conclude that much of this practice was a common holdover from their pagan roots. However, just where these pagan roots leads is a rather unanswerable question, as the Germans, Celts, and Romans all shared some form of holy adoration of sacred implements in localities. It is not impossible, though highly controversial, to consider evidence of Frankish adoration of relics as a heathen attribute. In Kern's work on Old Frankish, he notes that in the Lex Immedita there is reference to the word ballistica. However, there is nothing decidedly Christian about the description. Domus in modem ballisticae factus super hominem mortem, which translated is a ballistica in the shape of a dome built over a dead man. Kern compares this idea to the word stupa, tope, or katia in Sanskrit, with the meaning of that which is worthy to be gazed upon. It may be a stretch to make such a comparison, but the fact that this word ballistica has been used to designate a reliquary or perhaps a grave mound brings to mind the idea of King's Mound or cenotaph, which held cultic appeal among the Anglo-Saxon folk. This is further demonstrated by the Germanic root stupa, which finds in its modern English descendant in stub or stump. So, a further understanding of ballistica in this context can be a protruding mound which covers the remains of a dead man. If we compare this to the Norse cults of the mound as related to the king, we can see a similarity in the Hallig of the dead heathen king, or the Caesar of the early Christian saints' relics, which received a wide cult status and were looked to as a source of health and betterment to the folk. Kern also sheds some light on the etymology of Curioburgio, which he derives from a misinterpreted and wrongly described Chiriobardio. It is clearly a compound of two words which find their related forms in the Hlau grave burial mound and of sepulchrum. He then puts forward the definition of tumulus over the bones of a dead man. This could lead to the conclusion that the ballistica referred to in the Salic law is mound built over a dead man's bones, which is worthy to gaze upon. At this point in time, such conclusions are but mere speculation, and require further research to determine what such a possible link, if one may be found. Given the sufficient references to grave mounds honor such a practice. Given the sufficient references to grave mounds among the Franks and how such mounds were regarded among the Germanic peoples at the time with such honor, a practice of grave mound cultic activities may well have been commonplace and may have aided in the eventual adoption of reliquary cult practices. The many chanson de geste or songs of heroic feats of the French Middle Age, written by courtly poets known as troubadours, leave us with information on such notable late Frankish characters as Roland, Ogier, and Galen. These tales were the French answer to the Norse saga, as these poets' craft filled a similar function to the Skalds. This is proven by acts of the matter of France being adapted to the Norse saga for Haakon V of Norway. Some of the key heroic figures contained within the many tales are proof of the high popularity of Northern European heroic characters among the many royal courts. Roland's famed sword, Durendal, durable scimitar, contained in its hilt a tooth from St. Peter's blood, of St. Basil hair, of St. Basil hair, of St. Denis, and a piece of Mary's garment. In other conversions stretching from Norway to Germany and beyond, relics and names are slightly different, taking on characteristics of the various peoples who perpetrated these tales. This does not give us any insight into early Salian Franks mythology. They do show, through comparison, what the later Carolinians identified with and appreciated from the 12th century northern neighbors. Concerning the cult of St. Martin of Tours, it is possible to get an idea of what the indigenous cults of the Franks and possibly Burgundians, as well as some Gallo-Roman influences, through the vestiges of the Undi. By investigating the various cults of what Jean Drouet identified as the virgins in the trees. According to his research presented in Folklore Divinius at Morven, these cults to the Virgin Mary are syncretism between the pagan cults encountered by St. Martin of Tours on his travels throughout Burgundy in the 4th century in Christianity itself. He apparently tried fervently to eradicate these cults to female tree powers among the locals, though he did not accomplish his task to the fullest extent. In the same work it is mentioned that as early as 1832, there were still many locations in the region that called men and women to place things at the foot of these trees and talismans, as well as phylactery in the branches in hopes to improve their lives. Some of these various Notre Dames regulated to trees were various names, translating to Our Lady of the Elm, the Oak, the Ash, and the Hornbeam, respectively. Cults of these trees were quite common among the early heathens, and these modern holdovers are seen all throughout Europe. In the case of Our Lady of the Ash, we find a cognate in Sweden. Askafroa, and another Aschenfrau in Germany. On the continent, there are many tree and or grove cults, which are attributed to special sanctity, located directly at a Christian shrine or reliquary. Of the countries that hold the largest amount of these cults, we find France with a total of 30% of all these sites in Europe. Western Germany comprises 28%, while surprisingly Italy is in the first place with 31% of the pie. For Spain, we count 17%, which may demonstrate that the highest count of tree cults are found in areas historically greater Germanic concentration, though this may have been influenced by a Gallo-Roman element provided by syncretism. By the far most widely distributed cult was that of the oak tree, with 99% of the 276 similar cults. Once again, France leads with a 34% share, while Germany has 25% and Italy 19%. Is it so much a stretch of the imagination to consider the Franks having venerated at one time a cult of the ash or some other species of tree? As is demonstrated by in the Vita Elegi of the Carolingian area, men drove their livestock through hollow trees, and women, not wishing to produce viable offspring, would insert the semen of their husbands into dead trees, so its quality would suffer. I would think that there is no denying that well into the Christian Merovingian Gaul, heathen practices survived. Given these examples, the study of the Franks for the purpose of reconstructing their worldview is no less laudable than that of the Anglo-Saxons, Icelanders, Normans, and others. The new Christian religion, however pious it was meant to be, could not stem the old customs, and not even Caesarius of Arles could do so, having complained. And why do such wretches come to church? And why did they accept the sacrament of baptism, if afterwards they are to return to the sacrilege of idols? Their language having evolved from a congruence of vulgar Latin, with Frankish, Gaulish, and Saxon words, did not wipe their heathen worldview from within their being. Such changes were fluid and organic, taking hundreds if not thousands of years to occur. Even to the present day, some of those early customs persist in modern French and German law, and the holidays celebrated by the Germanic ancestors are still strong. Authors such as A.C. Murray, Catherine Fisher Drew, and Ian Wood, James Wallace Hadrill, and Henrik Kern, and others have only begun to scratch the surface of what is available for our understanding, though the majority of available written sources are in French. This is, to my mind, no excuse not to do proper research before proclaiming one to be a modern heathen of the Frankish type, or to prevent curiosity. Okay, so that was it, and I hope I didn't butcher too much of it because my throat's a little sore. I think I might be getting sick. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and hopefully YouTube doesn't disable my comments, because the last video I made yesterday, that happened. So hopefully that doesn't happen today. And next chapter is called Sacred Groves in Germanic and Scandinavian Heathenry: An Introduction and One Family's Experience by Gary B. Golden Jr. So hopefully you look forward to that, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.